welcome to week 8 of Comm1. Tonight we're going to go ahead and talk about Chapter 7, which is about listening actively. So this is just going to be a quick video kind of going over the module for those of you who may learn better through video than through text. So let's go ahead and get started. So we'll start with defining listening. So listening and hearing are two different things. Listening is basically an active behavior, where hearing is a passive behavior. So if you're listening to someone, you're actively trying to listen to them. You're attempting to perform that listening and engagement actively. But if you're hearing someone, that's kind of just the physical process of hearing someone and not actively engaging with the content. So for example, if you are listening to your favorite song or watching your favorite TV show, and maybe a family member, a roommate, a sibling comes in the room and tells you something important, you may have heard that information, in one ear and out the other, and not actually processed it or listened to it. So if we're going to define listening, we would call listening an active behavior that involves maximizing the audience's attention to comprehend what someone is communicating using words or actions. So basically, listening is something that must be constantly managed. Now, hearing is a physical, passive process. So if you ever hear of the phrase in one ear and out the other, most likely they're talking about hearing and not listening. So context can influence the hearing and listening process. You may not be able to actively listen to someone if there's a lot of background noise or if you're chewing some loud, crunchy chips. Those can kind of influence the listening process. So it's very important to note that you don't only listen as a speaker, but you also listen as an audience member. So as a speaker, you're listening to the audience members and trying to gauge their level of understanding. Do you need to explain something further? Maybe do you not need to explain something further? You can kind of see if the audience is bored. This can be a challenge with virtual speeches because you don't get that direct audience feedback. So there's active listening, which we've referred to throughout this lecture so far, which is putting effort forth. And there's also passive listening, which is little to no effort to process what is being communicated. So we also talk about responsibilities of speakers as well as audience members. So make sure to watch those videos and go through that content in the module because it is very important. So there are some barriers to effective listening. One might be physical conditions. So this could be air conditioner, heater, an airplane, a loud car, a motorcycle driving by. Those are all physical conditions or external noise that can influence the listening process. Now, if we're talking about internal noise, those are kind of personal problems. So let's say that I had a really long day at work and, I didn't bring lunch, so I wasn't able to eat lunch. And then I go to class and I'm super hungry and, there's a speech lined up. And during the whole entire speech, all I can think about is how hungry I am. That's also a type of noise that we'll refer to as internal noise. So although it's not loud where everyone else can hear it, there's still noise going on as you're kind of talking to yourself and involved in your thoughts. So the last thing that we talked about before talking about different listening styles were denotative and connotative meanings. Now, I did provide you additional reading, so that should help clarify what denotation and connotation is. But basically, to make a long story short, denotative meanings are basically dictionary definitions, where connotative meanings are associations that come to mind when you're encountering the word. So this is very important to know as a speaker because your word choices can influence if the audience is hearing or just listening. So I used the word snake as an example. The denotative meaning of a snake is a long reptile, a long-bodied reptile with no legs or something like that. And then the connotative meaning would kind of be someone who wasn't trustworthy, someone who was sneaky, things of that nature. So different cultures and contexts are going to have different connotations for words and phrases. Now, the last thing that we are going to talk about in this short lecture are listening styles. So we covered 4 different listening styles in the module. We have action-oriented listening, which basically is someone who's trying to take action while they're listening. So while they're listening to someone talk, they may be thinking about how they're going to respond to that message or how they're going to act once they, finish listening to the message. So that's action-oriented listening. Action-oriented listeners do prefer direct, concrete, error-free language, and they get frustrated by verbal clutter. So if you ever have been in a situation where you're frustrated by someone who's kind of using a lot of ums or likes in their sentences and you want them to just get straight to the point so you can go take action, then you're probably an action-oriented listener. One thing I want you to remember when it comes to listening styles is you don't necessarily always fall under one listening style. So for example, I might be action-oriented when I'm at work, but I may be more content-oriented when I am with my friends. So let's go ahead and talk about content-oriented listening. So content-oriented listeners prefer deep and complex language and messages, and they do enjoy engaging in the listening process. So if you listen to songs because you like the message and you like the words and you get consumed with trying to understand the content, you may be a content-oriented listener in that situation. I know that I am. So the third type of listener we talked about was a people-oriented listener. So people-oriented listeners are interested in listening with the ultimate goal of strengthening relationships, whether that's romantic or friendships. So relationship-oriented people or people-oriented listeners can be referred to either or. They notice nonverbal cues and express empathy. So if you ask someone how they're doing and they respond fine, you read between the lines if you're a people-oriented listener. You may know that that person is not fine, and you can tell by their body language, or maybe they're doing an activity that they do when they're stressed or anxious. So if you're a people-oriented listener, you don't just hear the message fine. You go deeper and basically you try to notice the whole picture of a message. So the final type of listener that we talked about is a time-oriented listener. So time-oriented listeners are concerned about time management, and they prefer to conserve and protect their time. So time-oriented listeners do often rush interactions and display impatience because they're so focused on saving time. So some people like to always be on time. I know I'm very much so like that, and my sister is not a time-oriented listener. So when we communicate, with my sister being mostly a people-oriented listener, we often have problems in our interactions. So it's something that both of us are working on. So the reason that we talk about these types of listening styles is so that you can adjust your listening style in certain contexts to be the best listener possible. So basically that's going to wrap up what we're going to talk about this week. Next, you're going to have to take a short 5-question quiz just to gauge your understanding of the chapter, as well as give you an opportunity to earn some participation points. So keep up the good work. I'll have your informative speech graded soon, and please reach out if you have any questions or if you would like to schedule a Zoom meeting. Have a great week.